Hi, everybody. I am Viktorya Vilk. I'm the Director for Digital Safety and Free Expression at PEN America. We are a nonprofit that is 100 years old at this point. We celebrate and defend the written word. I'm going to do a quick intro before we launch into the actual meat of the session. And so if you want to keep jumping into the chat as you file in and sharing what brings you here today, where you're coming from, if you're a reporter, etc., that would be very welcome. So thank you for joining us for today's online abuse self-defense training. It is the second session of our 6-part series, U.S. Election Safety Summer. We are very proud to be able to offer this critical training for journalists in the lead up to the U.S. elections, together with CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the IWMF, International Women's Media Foundation, as well as a whole slew of supporting partners, ACOS Alliance, Report for America, ONA, Reporters Committee for a Free Press, the Writers Guild of America East, the Indigenous Journalists Association, American Press Institute, Freedom of the Press Foundation, and the Society of Professional Journalists. We couldn't do it without all of our supporting partners. These webinars are going to be taking place on select Tuesdays at noon, and we are approaching safety in these webinars holistically. So we're recognizing the ways in which physical, digital, legal, and psychological safety are intertwined. So we're going to be covering all of those things. As many of you know, 2024 is a super election year. There are over 60 national elections happening around the world. And we know, unfortunately, that journalists face increased risk during election cycles. In the US, our election's taking place in November, and we are already seeing increased attacks against journalists. Our partners, the IWMF, have been leading this amazing Newsroom Safety Across America in-person tour in swing states across the United States. And they surveyed over 350 journalists. And what they found is nearly 40% of them had reported threats or experiences of physical violence. 30% reported digital threats and attacks, and 27% experienced legal threats. So as you can see, the sort of risks to journalists are clearly escalating in an election cycle. This series is specifically focused on reporters working in the US, but we hope that the safety tips we share are going to be useful to you regardless of your location, because we can see in the chat that we have folks from around the world. Last note, the chat is only visible to our panelists, as in me and Jeje, and a few other people, but we're going to be actively monitoring it. So please put comments in the chat, share your thoughts. Also, please use the Q&A. If you have a question, pop it into the Q&A. Sometimes the chat gets very busy, but in the Q&A, it's very easy for us to see your questions and answer them. So without further ado, as I said, I'm Viktorya. I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Jeje, who can jump in and introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Viktorya, for the introduction. My name is Jeje Mohamed. I am the Senior Manager for Digital Safety and Free Expression at PEN America. And I come from a background in journalism and then shifting into the safety and security field. Nice to be here with you.
Thank you, Jeje. So just to give you a snapshot, this is the second session. You'll see that the next session is about hacking and doxing. So please come to that. And then we'll have sessions on legal rights, physical safety covering protests, dealing with policing and crowds, and then a session on protecting your mental health and psychological well-being. So we hope you will come to all of them. Jeje, handing it over to you.
Thank you so much. So for today, these are some community agreements that we will have together. We want to start with some awareness to the content that we're going to be covering. We cannot necessarily talk about online abuse without talking about the traumatic experiences and the horrible things that people keep receiving and reading for being online, for the work that they're doing, or for who they are as well. It's important as well to recognize our own and each other's experiences. We do not walk the real world the same way. We do not navigate the world the same way. Our identities or our intersectional identities affect how we experience life, and it's similar to being online as well. We want to center learning and growth. We would love for you to share whatever things you learned here, skills, tips, anything that is mentioned about anyone else. Please, we would love to keep it here as just confidential. And as a reminder, again, the chat is only visible to us as panelists, and we will not mention people's names when we mention any comments or experiences you're sharing with us. It's also, we want to take collective accountability and respect for each other. And please, please, please take care of yourself however you need to. Discussing these topics is very heavy, and online abuse can be very isolating and re-traumatizing. So please take care of yourself. If you want to go grab a glass of water, please do that. Whatever you need to do, please do that in the meantime. We can go to the next slide. So today, as we mentioned, this is the second session, and it is about online abuse self-defense. We will talk to you and discuss with you the different ways that we can protect ourselves and navigate online abuse. We're going to start with definitions. So we're going to define what is online abuse and some of the tactics that are being used in this context, and also how it impacts us. Then we're going to talk to you about preparation, some very simple cybersecurity preparation. I promise nothing too complicated or complex, things you can apply on your daily life. Then we're going to discuss with you responding. What do we mean by response? What are the features and tools that exist in platforms that you can utilize if you're navigating online abuse? And also, how can you practice counter speech after assessing threats and making sure that you are keeping yourself safe and also others? Then we're going to talk about offering support. How can we establish a supportive cyber community? How can we ask for help? Or how can we also be good allies for each other? And finally, we're going to talk about practicing self-care. As I mentioned earlier, online abuse can be very isolating and can be very traumatizing for people. So it's very important to take care of each other and ourselves and our mental health. Question, if you can answer in the chat, and we will share these answers without the names of anyone. What brings you here today? What is one thing that you are hoping to learn today from this session? We're going to keep it in mind so that we can also stress if there are specific patterns we're seeing, we can make sure that we are covering these areas as well. How to deal with abusive comments on social media. Yes, we're definitely going to cover that. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. How to protect myself. Yes. Some people also mentioned earlier that in their work, their teams experience a lot of online harassment. So I'm hoping that the things we're going to be covering today will be helpful for you. How to protect yourself again. Yes, perfect. So we can begin, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. The way we define online abuse in Pan America is that it's the repeated or severe targeting of an individual or group online through harmful behavior. And there are a couple of important things about this definition. It is through harmful behavior, not necessarily with good intent. That's a one thing. But also, the reason why we mention severe and repeated is that online harassment happens in different ways. For example, I can be a journalist and only experience one incident of online abuse throughout my career that was really, really horrifying and terrifying. Like, for example, doxing. Someone publishing my home address, asking others to harm me. This counts as severe harassment, and it can be only one incident, but it's really terrifying. Then we talk about repeated. What we mean by repeated is that it's about the volume and the number, the amount of things that you're receiving. It's not necessarily like, for example, individual incidents are not necessarily annoying, maybe, but because of the amount and the volume of things you're receiving, that also counts as abuse and harassment. And for example, something like this, if someone bombards my phone with hundreds and hundreds of messages to the point that I cannot access my device or I cannot access my important messages, that counts as abuse. Now, let's talk about some of the tactics that we see happening. Hateful speech, it's very self-explanatory. Someone is targeting someone's identities. So, for example, it's slurs that are targeting the race, ethnicity, gender, religion, or sexual orientation or disability of a person. Then we have threats. And when we talk about threats, it's threats of physical violence. And in the cases with women and non-binary individuals, a lot of threats of sexual violence as well. And it is to intimidate the target and silence them. Then we talk about cyber mobs. And with cyber mobs, they are coordinated attacks by a group of abusers that they want to intimidate the person and send them a barrage of threats. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it's coordinated, but most of the time it is. Then we talk about doxing, which I mentioned in the definition. It's the publishing of sensitive personal information online without your consent. And it is, again, intimidate, extort, stalk, or steal identity. This can be personal email, personal private phone number, your home address, the school where someone's kids go to. It can be a lot of different ways of doxing. Another one that we also see a lot is online impersonation, and it's been increasing, specifically with the lack of verification in several platforms like Twitter, for example, that you have to pay to verify your account. And someone can use my photo, can use my name, creates a fake account, and publishes really horrible things to get me in trouble, like to get me discredited or something like that. Then message bombing, and with message bombing is that someone floods your phone or your email with useless, countless emails and messages to the point that it blocks access, whether to a device or an account or to important information. And we see this specific tactic as well being used when someone is trying to hack your account. You know, when like Facebook sends you this email that is like, there is an unauthorized attempt of login or something like that. If someone is trying to hack my account and they already subscribe me in these hundreds and hundreds of emails, I might actually miss that important email. Then we have non-consensual intimate images, and it's known by revenge porn, but we really do not like this term because it's not porn. It can definitely be for revenge, but it's not porn. And it's someone distributing private or manufactured explicit images or videos without your consent. And it has a gendered aspect to it as well. Then gender disinformation, someone spreading deceptive or inaccurate information and images to attack or undermine someone based on their gender. And this can have, like, of course, like political or social or economic objectives in while doing that. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you. So in the United States, and actually this is true globally too, but in the United States, online abuse is a pervasive problem. A recent study from Pew showed that over 40% of Americans had experienced online harassment, but not everybody is targeted in the same way or for the same reasons. Certain groups, women, racial and ethnic minorities, members of the LGBTQ community, are disproportionately targeted for their identity, as you can see in the graphic on the right. And for reporters, forgive me, I'm trying to do many things on the screen at the same time. For reporters, here's a really excellent study from UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists that found that women journalists, 73% of women journalists globally experienced online violence or online abuse because of their work. 1 in 5 said that online attacks morphed into offline attacks, so physical violence, and 38% made themselves less visible and self-censored on social media in various ways. So from a press freedom and free expression standpoint, online abuse is an enormous problem. It's also a problem from the standpoint of equity and inclusion in the journalism industry. So just so you have this, our colleague already put this in the chat, but we have a guide called the Field Manual Against Online Harassment, which offers comprehensive guidance resources about what to do if you're under attack online, how to prepare, how to respond, how to take care of your mental health. We have a whole section on the law. That section is specific to the United States. But if you're in the United States, that section will be very helpful to you. We wrote it with a whole bunch of lawyers. And this guide is also available in multiple languages, and it is regionally specific and in some cases country specific in other languages. So I hope that you can check it out. All right. We are going to delve right in. We would like to ask you to engage in the chat, and we will share people's responses. You are a well-established female reporter. After publishing an article about intimidation at a local polling station, you learn there's a sexually explicit photo with your head photoshopped onto it circulating online, along with your home address and a private phone number. If something like this is happening to you, how might you respond? What are some steps you might take to protect yourself now or protect yourself in the future? And if folks could jump into the chat and share their thoughts, we will read them out loud and offer guidance and ideas. Oh, I really like this. The first thing that I would do is save evidence. Yes, this is the piece that people often forget. But documenting what is happening to you, especially things like this, which are in some cases against the law, is really, really important. So you want to take screenshots, you want to save emails, you want to save voicemails. Keep evidence of what's happening to you. Thank you so much for that. Other folks? Oh, that's really clever. Someone is saying, take a screenshot of what's happening and upload it to stopncii.org. And in fact, Amanda, if you could just drop stopncii.org into the chat so folks can click on it, which will prevent it from being spread further. Stopncii.org is a site that essentially collates non-consensual intimate imagery or explicit imagery and tries to prevent it from spreading on other parts of the internet. Alert my editor and the company reps who handle reporter security. So if you have access to people within your institution, within your newsroom who deal with security, absolutely tell them what's going on. At the very least, tell your boss or your editor if you have a relationship with that person that is a trusted relationship. Report to proper authorities, right? That might be police, depending on your relationship with the police. It might be NGOs that you trust that can help you, but absolutely tell people that you trust that this is happening to you. Get another phone number that masks your primary number. That's a really good idea. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about how to get a Google Voice number. If you're international, there are other options available to you. Alert my colleagues and see if the organization has guidelines for responding to harassment. Some newsrooms do, some newsrooms don't. Shishi, do you want to jump in and toss out a few other ideas of what would be helpful to do in this situation?
Of course, yes. So thank you so much for all of these great, wonderful answers. So here, as we can see in this example, there is a sexually explicit photograph with your head photoshopped into it circulating online. Then there is the home address and private phone number. Victoria mentioned something very important, and someone mentioned it in the chat as well. For example, when it comes to the home address, that is a very terrifying thing if it happens to me. Like, I would be very concerned about my physical safety. So in this instance, I would consider definitely going to the police. And then we're going to talk more and more in a little bit about like our relationships to the police and how we can assess this safety. Another thing is that you can report the photo that has been posted online. If you report it, you're telling the platform that you want it to be removed. And you can ask others as well to report it. I would go to Victoria and ask her and my team and my friends if they can report as well on my behalf. This will tell the platform more and more, will direct the algorithm to pay attention to that specific thing. Then with a private phone number, I would also consider, like there is something with Google that is, if you look up, how do I remove my personal information from Google or from Google search? And you can like file like a form that will help you remove this information as a personally identifiable information. So there are
Amanda,
other
if you
things
could
that can
take
be
a
done.
minute to find that link, you should be able to find it pretty easily. I can't because I'm screen sharing, but there's if you Google how to remove my personal information from Google, you'll find it, but maybe Amanda will find it and drop it in the chat so everyone can have access to it. Sorry, Shishi, go on.
No, that's about it.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about one more and then we'll keep going so we don't run out of time. Let's see. Hold on, my apologies. Okay. A young male reporter who covers party conventions posts a message stating that several people have created impersonation accounts on Twitter using his name and photo. His post sounds alarms. He says the impersonation accounts are tweeting homophobic slurs and anti-Semitic images, and he doesn't know what to do. How might you support him if you find out that this colleague of yours is in this situation? And what might he be able to do to address the harm? And thank you, Amanda, for dropping in the link to getting personal information downlisted from Google. Anybody want to jump in? So somebody said, report the accounts. Absolutely. You absolutely want to report impersonation accounts. Twitter obviously is not amazing anymore at trust and safety and user protection, but it is still worth reporting the accounts. They are absolutely a violation of platform terms of service. Make a post on social media on behalf of your organization to let the public know that these are fake accounts to protect the reputation of the reporter who is not actually doing these awful things. That somebody else dropped that in the chat. I think that's really smart. Anybody else want to add anything? Turn on multi-factor authentication for the accounts. I think that is an excellent idea. It won't stop people from making impersonation accounts, but it will stop people from being able to hack into and take over your accounts. We'll talk about two-factor authentication in a minute and explain what that is in a bit more detail. So we talked about, just for this one, we talked about reporting the accounts. We talked about, I really like this. Someone said, personally reach out to this person. That's something super simple that we always forget, but it is often the most helpful thing you can do is just check in with the person, ask if they're okay, ask if there's something that you can do to help them, offer to say, you know, what can I report these for you? Would you like me to post something explaining that these aren't your accounts? You know, whatever you feel comfortable offering, can I help you set up two-factor authentication? That is really a good idea. Thank you for the person who suggested that. All right, so I think we're going to keep going. Jeje, did I miss it? Anything else you wanted to say about, I mean, certainly documentation is important in this context too. Sometimes platforms will reach out to you when you try to report something and ask you for evidence of something. So being able to show screenshots or point to links to these abusive accounts would be very helpful. Anything else I missed before we move on?
Not at all. Perfectly covered.
So I'm going to leave it to our colleagues, Nastya and Amanda, to figure out the last comment in the chat. Folks are having trouble clicking or copying the links. So I'm going to let you folks see if you can figure that out in the background while Jeje and I keep going. But hopefully we can find a solution to that problem. Sorry, folks, that you are not able to click on the links. Okay, so just a quick check-in. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. Thank you for sharing that issue with the links. We're going to dive right in. I think, Jeje, if you want to take over and talk us through some basics of digital safety, that's where we're going to start, and then we'll talk about, great, it looks like we solved the problem with the links. Sorry about that, folks.
Amazing.
So let's keep going, and I can probably, Jeje, look at the Q&A and see if there's questions there while you get cracking on the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So now, can we actually go to the second one, to the other one?
Sure can.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So now to very simple cybersecurity tips. These are some things that are very simple that we can apply in our daily life that actually protect us and help us have a bit more control over our information online. And the first thing we recommend is that to practice password hygiene. And what we mean by that is our passwords would be at least 16 plus characters. And we really, really recommend phrases. You can make it fun for yourself. You can use lines from poetry. You can use lines from your favorite book, a song that is stuck in your head and you don't know what to do about it. You can actually use it as a password mixed with some numbers. And also the other part of practicing password hygiene is to use unique password for each of your accounts. So that means if I have 10 accounts, I need 10 different passwords. Each of them is at least 16 characters, phrases mixed with numbers and symbols and other things. I know this sounds terrifying. If your memory is similar to mine, you will not remember even one of them. So there is a way to do it, and we'll tell you about it in a minute. The other thing as well is that to answer, when you're picking answers to your security questions, to pick difficult answers, things that are not Googleable. Meaning, what's your mother's maiden name? We are all journalists here. So we all know that we are very good at finding information about people, this is what we do. We research and we investigate and we find information. The thing is, people can do the same thing to us as well. So it's easy to find someone's mother's maiden name, or the model of your car, or all of these things, or like the name of your favorite pet. If you love your pet and you post like all of these pictures on Twitter publicly for everyone to see with the name of your pet, so that answer is already online. People can just find it. So what we recommend is that create lies to answer these questions. It's fine. No one cares. What is my pet? A shark, a dolphin. Really, no one cares, but it's keeping me safe and secure more. If we can go to the next slide, I want to show people some. So here, if you go to this website, how secure is my password? Remember, we talked about password hygiene a minute ago. If you go to this website, please, please, please do not enter your actual password, but like use something that resembles it. If your password is a 4-letter word with like 3 numbers, like use something similar to that and see how long it takes this website to actually predict and figure out your password. It can take like, it's really, sometimes it's scary that it can take milliseconds, 2 milliseconds or 3 milliseconds for someone to figure out my password. But this is why we recommend the 16 plus characters. We recommend the phrases mixed with numbers and the uniqueness of the password as well. If we can go to the next slide. Now, back to the tips. We talked about password hygiene. We talked about answering security questions. Wait, there is a really good question. Would a password generator and manager be okay, such as 1Password? Like, see, this is my third point, actually. Now, this is the best thing that we can all use. I really love password managers because, as I said, if you have 10 accounts, and I know that all of us have definitely way more than that, if you have 10 accounts and we're telling you to have 10 different passwords, 10 unique passwords, each of them 16 plus characters, then to create all of these slides to answer the security questions, how will we remember them? And this is where password managers come in handy. They are really good. They're softwares or platforms that help you. They act like a vault. You can save your passwords and these slides you're going to be creating for security questions there. And it can also help generate strong passwords for you. Not all password managers are good, and not all of them are like the same or equally good as each other. For example, you want to use a password manager that is encrypted so that even if someone figures out the master password of the password manager, they will not make sense of the information stored there because it's encrypted. They will need this key for this information to make sense. So here on the screen, we have Bitwarden, Dashlane, 1Password. All of these are good password managers that you can use. I want to check, but can password managers not be hacked? Yes, they can. Like, yes, but if you're using a good password manager that is encrypted, even if it gets hacked, even if someone can access, if it's encrypted, there is an additional layer of security that will need to be figured out for them to make sense of the information. So this is why we always recommend, like, if you're choosing a password manager, please go and choose something that is encrypted. Now, to the fourth thing that we recommend as well when it comes to your security, to enable two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication on as many accounts as possible. What we mean by that is think about the combination of your username and password as the first lock you add on your door, the door of your house. You have one lock, which is the combination of your username and password. Now, isn't it good to add an additional lock just in case the other lock, the first lock, is not working anymore? Think of the two-factor authentication as the second additional lock you add to your door for protection. And it requires you to provide a PIN to prove that you are the individual trying to log into an account. And there are 3 different ways that you can do that. The first one, you can use your SIM card, your phone number, that will send you a message with that PIN that you will use. And we do not recommend this method too much because of something called SIM jacking. And SIM jacking is not a fun thing to experience at all. It happened to me and it was such a pain to actually figure it out and fix things. What happens is that someone can call your phone company, whatever that is. You can call your phone company, pretend to be you, and ask them to reroute traffic to another device or another SIM card. So they will have access to your phone calls and you will have access to your messages. So if your verification method is a message, then they will have access to that one as well. But the good thing is there is a way to actually protect yourself from that and make it harder for people to SIM jack your account. You can call your phone company and ask them to add a PIN or set up a PIN on your mobile account. So that would be an additional layer of security, and no one can make changes to your mobile account without providing that PIN. Now let's go back to the two-factor authentication. We talked about SMS, we talked about messages and why we're not recommending it that much. There are 2 other methods that also you can use. The most secure one, which is using a physical key, a YubiKey, this is the most secure method because you need to physically inject this key into your device, whether phone or laptop, for it to fill the passwords for you. But sometimes it can be a little bit complicated for people, or like an additional layer that people sometimes find heavy. But it depends on your level of risk and your the risk appetite that you have and the risk level that you have with your work. For example, if I am covering white supremacist groups in the US and I am worried about escalation and I'm worried about threats, I would recommend someone to use that physical key because it's a very good security measure. The third one, the third method that we recommend, and is actually very, very good, is to use an authentication app, something like Authy or Google Authenticator. They are an application that generate random numbers that expire within seconds. And this is how it keeps you secure. You have to enter that PIN before it expires, or it will generate a random new one for you. If you can also send us in the chat, who here uses two-factor authentication on their devices? And do you feel that it's helpful or not? And one thing to keep in mind that is very important, no matter what two-factor authentication method you use, make sure to save your backup codes somewhere safe, please, because you might be locked out of your account if you lost your authentication method, if you lost access to it. So save your backup codes. You can print them, you can add them, print them and put them in a book or something like that, whatever it is that can be safe and for them to be secure. I use it on some accounts. Some people said I have to use two-factor for school. That's really good. I use two-factor authenticator app plus YubiKey on my work computer. Wow, that's actually very good. Amazing. Perfect. Amazing. That's really wonderful. If we can go to the other slide. So we talked about password managers. And here you can see that 1Password actually provides journalists with a free account for 5 years. If you go to the link that Amanda just dropped in the chat, 1Password for journalists, you can send them an email. They are very responsive. They can provide you with an account for 5 years, I believe, the period that they provided. And it's really wonderful. And also this is what I'm using now, actually. If we can also go to the next slide. And Victoria. Okay, so perfect. Thank you so much. No, now it's here. So now, honestly, if there is one thing I would focus on in this session is that it's about how we change our thinking about our information and our digital footprint. So, for example, what we mean by separating personal and professional is that we are more conscious and aware about what information are we posting where. And also you can ask yourself why. For example, if I use my Twitter X account for work purposes or for professional purposes, and it's public for everyone to see, and I want to, for example, whatever, promote the work I'm doing, conferences I'm going to, whatever it is that I'm doing, I do not add personal information there. I do not add pictures with my family. I do not tag my family or my friends anywhere. I do not add my birthday there because it's a personally identifying information. So I'm just very careful about the information I am sharing on that platform. While if I have an Instagram account that is private, that is very locked down, and I know who I have there, I feel a little bit more comfortable sharing things there. I feel comfortable having my friends there, but that's because not everyone has access to that account. So it's about really being very careful and cautious about how we're using our platforms for what purposes and what type of information we're posting there. And you can think about also the emails that you have. We recommend people to have at least 3 emails, one for work, one for your personal things, bank accounts, medical, whatever subscriptions or accounts. And another one would be for junk and subscriptions and the 10% of Macy's that you want to get if you click on this thing. So just be careful and separate your accounts from each other. You can do the same thing with your phone number as well. Some people said in the chat, they have 2 different phone numbers, and this is something that we really recommend. This is why we created this resource that you can visit, and it's bite-sized videos that will help guide you on how to protect yourself from hacking and doxing. And this was a couple of summers ago, and a lot of it is still valid for people to use. If we can go to the second
Yeah, I
one.
just wanted to say that
Yes.
our next session is going to be focused on how to dox and hack yourself. We will not literally have you dox and hack yourself, but we will teach you how someone might do it to you, so you can do it instead to yourself and prevent other people from doing it to you. So come to the next session, which I think is in a week, and we will talk you through some of the things we just like quickly breeze through, but in practice in real time on your devices. That's what I was going to say. Okay, so we've been talking about preparation, right? Let's say you did all the digital safety stuff you were supposed to do or that we are encouraging you to do, and harassment strikes, right? What are some of the things that you can do? The question that I'm usually asked most frequently is, when do I go to the police? That's what people always want to know. And I'm going to give you an unsatisfying answer, which is that there is no easy answer to that question. Whether or not you go to the police is a complex personal decision that is informed by your life experiences and the work that you're doing and the relationships you've had with the police. It can be very difficult because of the anonymity that is often offered by the internet to tell how seriously to take a threat, to identify or locate a perpetrator. And so what we're going to do is talk you through the kinds of information that you might want to think about and the things you might need to know in order to make a good decision that works for you. My feeling is that if you're in the US and you get a death threat, report the death threat. Or if you get something really scary that makes you afraid for your safety, report it, because even if the police are not helpful to you, you've created a paper trail. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But creating a legal, in a way, like legally admissible, permissible paper trail of any kinds of online attacks you're getting that make you fearful for your safety or that might be against the law is really valuable. And if you are uncomfortable engaging with law enforcement alone, you may want to see if your employer can help you do it, if you have a trusted colleague who can help you do it. That's something we've actually done in our own organization when we've had to in the past, and it's been pretty effective. So ask yourself, if you're trying to figure out if something, if the harassment that you're experiencing, the degree to which you're concerned about it in terms of your actual physical safety, it really helps to ask yourself a series of questions, preferably with a friend or colleague nearby, because they might give you a good kind of sounding board. And I have a tendency, for example, to downplay things, and I'll just say, oh, but it'll be fine. But having someone next to you who might say, well, actually, I don't know about that. Let's really think that through and decide whether this needs to be raised to law enforcement or someone else. So ask yourself some questions. First question you're asking yourself is, has this thing made me feel physically unsafe? Or does it have me concerned about the safety of my family, my friends, or my colleagues? If the answer to that is yes, it is critically important, A, to file a report with law enforcement. And if they are giving you a hard time, insist on getting a police report. B, it's really important to talk to your employer about the fact that you are concerned for your safety. Question to ask yourself, do you know the harasser? And do they have a history of erratic behavior or violence or escalation? Are you getting threats that are direct or specific? So rather than something that's like, all women are, don't deserve to live, you get something that has your name, that talks about a time and a place, or that talks very specifically about what someone might do to you if they got a hold of you. That kind of stuff is really important to take seriously. If you're experiencing stalker-like behavior, right, you're repeatedly having the same account or the same person cropping up for days or weeks or months. In legal terms, that's something called a course of conduct, which you often have to be able to demonstrate. You have to be able to demonstrate that something was happening repeatedly over time, which is why the police reports are so helpful sometimes, in order, for example, to be able to get a restraining order against someone. So definitely take stalker-like behavior seriously. Indicia of irrationality, the way that a media security expert explained this one to me is, it's the stupid ones I'm afraid of. So people who threaten you, but then use their real name, their real phone number, their real email. They don't really try to mask their identity. That is something to take very seriously. It's counterintuitive, right? Because you think, oh, but if they're doing it openly, then at least I know who they are. But if they're doing it openly, they may not believe that there are going to be any consequences for their action. They may be unstable. They may be dangerous to you. If the online conduct is migrating offline, so if you start to get physical mail, if you start to get voicemails, right? You were getting something on Twitter and all of a sudden you're getting someone found your number and you're getting voicemails and they're threatening. That kind of stuff is really important to keep an eye on. And if you're concerned about professional liability, right? Are you concerned that something is going to damage your career prospects or make it more difficult for you to make a living? So there might be many other reasons why you decide to report something to law enforcement. In some cases, there's a FBI reporting system that I will have to find in the background and send a link to. It's not always helpful, but there are cases in which it's useful. And at the very least, please be sure to tell your employer or someone that you trust that can help you think through what to do. So those are just a few kind of top line thoughts. We don't have time to get into all the details of physical safety today, but I wanted to particularly talk about threats because that is one of the forms of harassment, the tactics of harassment that often make people most afraid, most worried about their families and their friends and themselves. So I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about red flags to look out for. I also want to encourage you to look at these two excellent legal guides. The one from Penn on the right, which our colleague Amanda can also drop a link to the legal consideration section of our field manual in the chat. As I said, it's US specific, but it is a really robust, comprehensive guide on leveraging the law if you are navigating abuse in the US context. And then the thing that's on the left of the screen is actually an international, it's got summaries of laws in multiple countries around the world that can be leveraged if you're dealing with online hate and harassment. So I just want to flag those two resources. The very best thing you can do is to know your rights. And in a pinch, I strongly suggest trying to find a lawyer that you can talk to. And the good news is that in the journalism community in the US anyway, the Reporters Committee for a Free Press, which will be doing our legal training in a few weeks, the Reporters Committee for a Free Press has a 24/7 legal hotline. So if you are trying to figure out how to leverage the law because you're dealing with online hate and harassment and you're not sure if the law is going to be helpful to you, reach out to the RCFP Reporters Committee for a Free Press hotline, which we can also, Naistit, thank you. Naistit has dropped in the chat. And if Amanda could also drop in the legal section for the field manual in the chat, that would be very helpful. Okay, moving on. So we talked a little bit about this earlier. It is incredibly important to document, to save evidence of the abusive content that you're experiencing that is concerning to you. Obviously, if you are someone who unfortunately gets an enormous amount of abuse and most of it you don't really think twice about, it doesn't bother you, you don't want to look at it, that's fine. But if there are things that are making you concerned for your safety, if there are things like non-consensual intimate imagery or death threats or publication of private information, some of which may be against the law, not all of which, it is really, really important to take records of that. And so what we mean by that is one simple thing you can do is just toss screenshots into folders. It's also really useful if you can, when you're taking a screenshot, really make sure you capture the username of the abusive account and save any URL that might be useful, right? You can also find archival links on the Wayback Machine if you thought you saw something and then it disappeared. But doing it in the moment is actually the best thing you can do because then you don't risk losing track of it. For Twitter, for example, it's really useful, and this is relevant to Facebook too, to capture any kind of engagement with a post, right? Quotes, tweets, comments, likes, to show that that post, didn't have just two people look at it. If you're getting an email, you can sometimes look at the IP address. It's a number that looks like the one we have on the screen, which can actually help identify, in some cases, the location that the email came from. Some people know that and they're good at hiding it. They're good at masking their IP address, but if you can see that number, that's helpful to save. If you get text calls, voicemails, try not to delete them. I know it's uncomfortable to have to keep folders of all of this awful stuff, but it's really important later if you ever try to pursue legal action or try to demonstrate to an employer something that you're dealing with. And in some cases, we've worked with people who, for example, are dealing with a stalker, and so they'll actually make a spreadsheet and they'll map engagements with that stalker so they can then use it when they talk to a lawyer and get advice from law enforcement about like, what do I do with this person who seems to keep cropping up? And that helps them establish what we call a course of conduct. So again, just a little bit of kind of crash course in the importance of keeping evidence of what's happening to you, especially if it makes you concerned for your safety or the safety of the people that you love. Anybody have questions on any of this? I'm going to pause just for a minute because it's a lot of material and it's material that can be quite stressful to people. So I'm going to pause for a minute. If you have questions or thoughts that you want to share in the chat or questions for the Q&A, please go ahead and drop them in. whether it's about documenting, whether it's about engaging with law enforcement. And then we're going to keep going so that we have time to wrap up. We've got another 30, 40 minutes, but we are going to keep a pretty steady clip so that we are making the very best use of your time. No, not seeing anything cropping up. Okay, I'm going to keep going, but please feel free at any time to drop in comments or questions. We are more than happy to pause and address them. So another thing that we would suggest, so we talked about number one most important thing is ask yourself if something has made you feel physically unsafe. Number two, it's really important to save evidence of what's happening to you. Another thing that you can do is use the features of tools built into platforms themselves to give you at least a measure of protection or support. Now, not all of the in-platform tools work equally well. We all know that, often through personal experience, hard won, but they can be really useful, and we're going to talk you through a few of them. So it's really helpful, for example, to understand the differences between blocking, muting, or in some cases, some platforms call it hiding, right? Muting or hiding, and restricting. They work differently. They do different things. They should really be leveraged for different purposes. So if you block someone, you are essentially stopping communication between you and the abusive account. So they can't follow you, they can't DM you, but in some cases they can tell that they've been blocked, and depending on the platform, they might be able to, like Twitter, make a bunch of new accounts and start attacking you from those accounts instead, because they can tell that you've blocked them. That said, blocking can be incredibly effective. It can definitely restrict dealing with certain abusive accounts. Just keep in mind that some abusive trolls will escalate if you block them because they can tell, and they will try to get at you from other accounts. On Facebook, where it's quite a bit harder to make a bunch of new accounts, that situation might look different, but on Twitter, it's very easy to make new accounts. Muting doesn't stop communication between you and an abusive account. What it does is actually prevent you, the person who's being targeted, from having to see communications that you don't want to see. So you could, for example, insert a bunch of keywords in Facebook or in Twitter and say to that platform, please mute anything that has these words. You can use keywords, you can use phrases, you can use usernames that you don't want to have content from, emojis, hashtags. These are all ways to actually sort of protect your mental health and limit visibility. The good thing is that other people don't know if you've muted their content or muted them. So they're not going to escalate because they won't even know that it's happened. It doesn't necessarily stop abusers, but it protects your mental health. The only thing I will flag about muting is that if you are getting death threats and you are muting content that might, right, you're choosing a keyword that could appear in a death threat, like death, kill, something like that, you might miss the death threat. And so one of the things you can actually do is buddy up. You can say to a trusted colleague or a friend, I'll monitor your mentions if you monitor mine. And just like check each other's mentions every few days to make sure that if you've muted a bunch of stuff, there's still someone else keeping an eyeball out in case someone is threatening you. Now, restricting is only available on Instagram, but it's probably the most useful of all of these features because it solves some of the downsides of blocking and muting. If you restrict someone on Instagram, you've not only stopped communication with them, but you've basically hidden all the things they are trying to interact with you about, right? If they're posting things on your feed or whatever, or commenting on things, they don't know that no one else can see what they've done. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's basically like you're kind of hiding their stuff from other eyeballs, but they don't know it. So they won't escalate because they don't know that you've done it. So unfortunately, it's only available on Instagram, but it's very, very helpful. And I want to just add that someone has said that they have actually found that reporting on Twitter can be effective. I do want to encourage you folks to report. So I'm going to jump to the next slide, which is about reporting. So I was talking about blocking, muting, restricting. Those are tools that do one set of things. Reporting is different. When you report abusive content on a platform, you're saying to the platform, this piece of content or this account is violating your policies and should be punished in some way, removed, suspended, whatever, right? If the content that you're getting is not violating platform policy, the platform isn't going to do anything about it. But if it is, and you think that it is, then report it. And in some cases it will work, in some cases it won't. The platforms are sometimes very good at navigating content that's been reported and sometimes really bad at it. I still say do it. So a couple tips about reporting. If you or someone in the management of your organization, for example, has a direct line to a tech company, human, living, three-dimensional being, use it. If you tried to report something and nothing happened, and you don't understand what's wrong, why it wasn't taken down, why it wasn't addressed, reach out to any human being you can find at a platform. Unfortunately, there are fewer and fewer human beings being employed by platforms in this moment to do trust and safety work, right, to protect users. Platforms have been downsizing and they've been firing those people, but I still suggest that you try to find a live body if you can, if your usual channels of reporting are not helping you. If there's a space in a reporting forum or whatever, where you report the content to offer a little bit of language, point to the community standard that's been violated. It will actually help you, it will save time. Many platforms don't actually give you the opportunity to enter any text. You just have to click buttons, in which case there's nothing you can do. But if you can point to what the violation, the standard that's been violated, that can be helpful. And finally, Jeje mentioned this before, what Jeje mentioned before is ask people to help you report abusive content. And I'll give you an example of that. Julia Yaffe is a reporter who has dealt with an extraordinary amount of sexist and anti-Semitic abuse over the course of her career. She's gotten very good at dealing with it. What she will often do is she will report the abusive content. And then if it doesn't get removed, or if the platform tells her that it is not a violation of their terms, she will actually ask her followers to help her report it, and then she will flag Twitter. Now, I have to say, generally speaking, Twitter at this point is just a cesspool. So Elon Musk, Twitter's dear leader, is not particularly concerned with safety of users. And so there are a lot fewer people working at Twitter to protect users. The systems that used to be imperfect don't work anymore at all now. However, I still say use the features that are available to you as best you can on a platform like Twitter. And on other platforms, some of this stuff is still working reasonably well, at least some of the time. So I'm gonna pause for just a minute and see if we have any questions about reporting, blocking, muting, restricting, any other features that are available on platforms. And then we're gonna move on to talk a little bit about whether or not you should feed the trolls, which is everyone's other favorite question, other than when do I go to the police? People always ask me, should we feed the trolls? I'm like, well, let's talk about that. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But any questions or comments from folks about using in-platform features? No. Okay. One person said that they might themselves be gradually becoming a bot, or might become a bot. What do you do when everything fails? I mean, it happens. Like, you mean if you block and they still get at you, if you mute and they still get at you, you honestly, you ask a friend to help you. I hate to be so kind of defeatist about it, but if you have tried to use all the platform features and you're experiencing, sometimes some of us have been through like a multi-day harassment campaign. It'll last several days and then it'll blow over. In that several days, you can reduce your visibility on a lot of the platforms just for a few days. And in our next session, we'll show you how to do that. And then ask your friends to help you. Ask them to document, ask them to report, ask them to block and mute so that you can take a little bit of a psychological breather from this horrible several days. And then when it dies down, you can make yourself more visible again. That is my suggestion. I would warmly welcome if others of you have been in this scenario where you're kind of doing all the right things, because you can't control how other people behave, right? So you're doing all the things you can do to keep yourself safe and you're still under attack. What do you do? If folks have thoughts that they would like to share their own strategies that they've developed, we would warmly welcome those, and we will sort of read them out loud without naming any names as we go.
I would support also asking people for help. Asking a friend or a colleague that you trust is something that is very important as well.
Okay, Jeje, I'm handing over to you to talk about troll feeding.
The other favorite question, yes. So, to feed or not to feed the trolls? This is a question that comes to mind, whether you're someone on the receiving end, or like maybe also if you're trying to support someone and you don't know, like, should I engage in this or not? But let's talk about like, what do we actually mean by feeding the troll? And what we definitely do not ever mean that you engage in the cycle of abuse and violence or abuse the abuser. This is not what we mean in any way. What we mean when we say feeding the trolls is that At what point should we engage or can we engage? What are the ways that we can engage, practice counter speech, and all of these things in a healthy way, in a non-abusive way, because again, we do not want to perpetuate that cycle of abuse over and over. So, and there are so many reasons why people have decided to engage, and so many reasons why people have decided not to engage. And let's start with why not to engage, these reasons why. Some people, when they did the threat assessment that Viktorya walked us through earlier, they found that engaging might actually have potential of violence and making things worse. And that the harasser, you remember the question that Viktorya asked, do you know your harasser? Does your harasser have a history of escalation and violence? When they asked these questions, the answer was yes. So if the harasser has a history of escalation or violence, or that engaging might have a potential for increase of violence and escalation, then this might not be the best idea to engage. Another thing, if you're targeted by mob or potential bot army, no one wins. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of your time. We're not going to win against a computer that is like just a bot that keeps like sending all of these things over and over again. So that's actually meant to suck your energy and waste your time. And we do not want to do that. Another thing as well is that if you're not ready emotionally or psychologically for confrontation, for me, sometimes I am in that I have energy to like, I want to denounce this, I reject this, and I want to stand up for myself and correct something that is wrong. But other times, I just want to hide and be like, hide under my blanket and be left alone. And both are fine. And it's important for us to know where we are because that might affect the way we respond. If I am already tired, exhausted, whatever it is, and I am in that situation. So, and the troll wants to push me enough to do something wrong or say something wrong. They screenshot it, send it to my employer, and get me in trouble. That can be one of the reasons. So, it just like my response will also depend on how ready I am to engage. And if I'm not in a place psychologically or mentally or emotionally to confront or to engage, then it might not be the best idea. And also for me to take care of my mental health and just rest if this is what I feel like I need to do. And the last thing as well is that you might, like, you engaging might violate your employer social media policy. So we really, really recommend that you check this out. Check what the social media policy that you have or engagement, like if there is anything about engagement online that you have, check it out so that just like you don't accidentally violate your employer social media policy. And a lot of trolls want to get you in trouble. So we don't want to give them that. We don't want to give them satisfaction of that as well. Now, let's talk about why so many people also choose to engage. So if it is to fact check a false claim or to correct a false narrative, specifically if of impersonation, if someone is creating a false fake account or an impersonation account using my name and my photo and publishing all of these horrible things to get me in trouble or to discredit me, yeah, this is a point where I'm like, maybe I actually should do something. I want to do something so that I correct this false narrative. And just for people to know that I'm not this person that is saying all of these things. This is a fake account, and please help me report it. Or simply to reject hate and bigotry and stand up for a thing that you believe in and stand up for others. That also is a reason why some people have chosen to engage.
I'm just going to jump in. I'll hand to the next line in just a minute. I just want to jump in and say, like, the main takeaway I'm hoping you folks take from this question of feeding or not feeding the trolls, in a way, that's the wrong question. It is absolutely okay to practice counter speech if you are doing so in a way that feels safe and empowering to you and not engaging in abusive behavior towards others. But there's a huge difference between using your voice and directly trying to have a conversation with, a debate with, an argument with an abuser or an attacker. It is very rarely going to be satisfying or useful to engage directly with an abuser or an attacker, but that doesn't mean that you have to be completely silent, right? You might have your own followers, your own channels. You might have a blog where you write about things that are happening to you, right? Or thoughts that you have. There are ways that you can use your voice so that you're not silenced, that don't involve trying to engage with someone that is almost certainly engaging with you in bad faith and will just try to waste your time. So I just wanted to kind of flag that distinction. Go ahead, Jeje.
Or about army.
Or a bot army, which is like, it's like you're yelling at computers, and it's not very useful. Okay, Jeje, back to you.
Thank you so much. So these are some examples. We're going to talk about like some examples actually of people who have decided to practice counter speech and engage in ways that are very helpful and healthy for them. So Maria Ressa uses her platform. She's a wonderful journalist, does an amazing work in the Philippines. She's unfortunately inundated with harassment, lawsuits, and so many other things for the work that she's doing. And she actually decides to engage and to use fact checking as a method. And when she was asked, why is she doing that? Her response was, if they're real people, I want to let them know they're being deceived. That's what social media was really made for. Plus, ignoring exponential lies, that doesn't work. For her, this method is working. And she finds that investing energy and time in fact checking is something that is useful for her and what she believes in. Another example as well is what happened with Brandy Zadrozny. And Tucker Carlson mentioned her name in one of his segments. And unfortunately, that also unleashed on her all of these people that sent her all of these abusive comments and threats of rape and death and all of these horrible things. And what happened is that NBC News published a statement of support and denouncing what's happening. Then her colleagues have been publishing and tweeting in support of her and all of the wonderful work that she's doing. This is a really lovely way to be an ally. Like, for example, if this is happening to me, I might want my colleagues to publish all of the work that I'm doing. Maybe like this is the segment or like the article or the thing that I published that has kind of sparked this harassment. And I want this to be the highlighted thing, not the harassment and the abuse I'm receiving. So you can help your colleagues by highlighting the work that they're doing and how wonderful they are as journalists as well. And then another example is another one of fact-checking a false claim and asking for help, actually, both of them. Chloe Condon is a technologist that went to a conference, and then this person published that she stole his work and she's sending him harassment and all of these things. And what she did is that she published online, she took a screenshot and published online and said, I don't know this person and I never saw him before and all of that. What happened is that her fans online put on their investigative hats and looked up this person, and they found that he has been doing this to other women in the tech industry as well. So they, revealed all of this information, and then he apologized and said like, oh, that was not me. Someone took over my account. This is a really nice ending, which is not the case always. This is one of my favorite ways to practice counter speech, which is to actually like use creative counter speech. A person that we know, a journalist that we know, what he does is that when he receives hate emails, he would respond with a picture of a puppy or a rabbit or like a cute cat with no words at all, no context. Imagine just receiving that after sending a horrible thing before. It confuses people sometimes. And other people also use that in like a thread on Twitter or something like that that is happening and all of these horrible things are being said. Sometimes just doing that, it really changes the energy and it changes this intense and maybe hateful conversations that keep happening. And you can also, like, some people use fundraising links, some people use like all of these different ways, creative ways, to break that tension as well.
I love, someone just put in the
Oh my
chat.
God, I love that one.
I've seen people post a photo of a cute animal and then write, this is who you were harassing. Someone dropped that in the chat. I'm curious if you folks have seen other examples of creative counter speech. If you could toss them in, I would love to hear about them. We always pick up interesting ones. We had someone there's a writer who, when she's under attack, she encourages her followers to donate $1 to her favorite anti-hate organization. There's a podcaster who created a whole series called Conversations with People Who Hate Me, where they interviewed a person who was attacking them on the internet. So I'm just flagging some of those ideas because they were very funny. All right, we are going to take just a minute to check in. How are people doing? We have 2 more sections. They're not very long, and then we'll wrap up. Do folks want to just drop in the chat, how are they doing? Are we going too slow? Are we going too fast? Did we miss something that was really important for you that we cover? Quick gut check, and then we'll move forward and talk quickly about allyship and like how to ask for help, how to provide people with help, and how to try not to lose your marbles while this is all happening to you, which is not easy. Okay, we're hearing it's okay. Good, keep going. If anyone else wants to share anything in the chat, please do. So, if there's one thing I'm hoping you walk away with today is that harassers, like all abusers, want to isolate you. They want to intimidate you into silence, and they want you to be isolated so that you feel helpless, alone, overwhelmed. It is a known tactic amongst harassers and abusers. And so what we really want to encourage you to do is, one way of fighting back is not necessarily practicing counter speech, but actually asking for help from the people that you trust and that care about you. It can feel profoundly empowering. It can feel uncomfortable initially, but then once people actually, with all earnestness, jump in to help you, it can feel very empowering. And so some ways that you can do that. One thing we suggest to people is, if you're someone who experiences a lot of abuse in your work, we find that it's helpful to have kind of two different groups of people. One group of people we sort of call a rapid response team. What I mean by that is it's a very small group. It's maybe 5 people, maybe 3 people that you really trust. It could be a spouse, it could be your closest colleague, it could be a best friend, a sister, whomever. A small group of people that you put in a WhatsApp group or a iMessage group or a Facebook group or whatever. And you basically go to them when things get bad. Most of the time, like, you tell them why you're putting them in the group, and you say, most of the time this group is going to be silent, but somebody suddenly tries to hack me or doxes me, or I'm getting a coordinated harassment campaign, I need to be able to come here to all of you and ask you to do a few specific things for me, or just complain to you because I'm angry, upset, and frustrated. It's really, really helpful to have that group of people. Separately from that, there is the larger group of people whom you might not be comfortable asking really detailed, specific things, or you don't know them well enough to trust to, for example, have them babysit one of your accounts for a few days, but you could ask them to help you report abusive content to a platform. You could ask them to share your work instead of to try to kind of drown out the abuse, and instead focus on the actual things that you're good at and want to be doing out in the world, right? So that might be alumni groups, classmates, friends and family, publishers, editors, colleagues, all the people who follow you if you have a big following on a platform. And what you can do is actually issue a call to action. You can offer a few words about what's happening and then tell people something concrete or specific that you would find helpful. So, for example, followers of my blog are being drowned out by trolls flooding the comment section with rape threats. I need a break from these attacks. If you're willing to lend a hand as a guest moderator, DM me. That's just one example. There are many other things you could ask people to do. And here are some things that you can ask people to do. So you can ask them to monitor, report, or document on social media when you need a break, right? So monitoring mentions anyone can do. They can't get to your DMs, right, unless you give them access to your account, but they can definitely monitor your mentions. They can report abuse for you. They can document, they can take screenshots for you. It's absolutely okay to ask people to do this for you, and conversely, to offer to do that for someone who's under attack, whom you're close to and want to support. Jeje mentioned this before, but amplifying the thing the person was trying to say before they were attacked is really helpful, because part of the reason that people do these abuse campaigns is that it drowns out the article or the idea or the op-ed or whatever that the person who was under attack was trying to put out into the world, right? The whole point is to drown out their stuff, to silence them. And so actually it's incredible if you just ignore the abusers altogether and draw attention to someone's work that they were trying to get out to the world before they were attacked. It's extremely helpful. You can rally a community around someone, right? You can say, let's all post puppy photos all over this thread until these abusers go away. You can reclaim a negative hashtag by flooding it with animal gifs or positive messages. Some of you may remember the amazing Proud Boys hashtag reclaim, where the Proud Boys are a nationalist, white supremacist group in the United States that do extremely harmful things. But there was this wonderful campaign of folks who took the hashtag Proud Boys and filled it with images of gay men in love. And it was very lovely and moving, and totally drowned out all of the Proud Boys messaging for a period of time. Leverage your influence, your privilege, or your power to denounce hate or fact check false claims. So if you're someone who is not getting a lot of abuse, but you can see someone that you work with who is, you can actually use your own privilege and power to fact check something to say, hey, this is an impersonation account of this person, it's not their real account, or hey, it is completely unacceptable to bombard someone with hateful slurs like this. There are things that you can do to basically step up. And I just want to offer a few top line tips. Vigilante reporting anyone can do. You can report abusive content on most social media platforms, even if it's not happening to you. So again, provided that content actually violates platform policy. If you just find it annoying and didn't like it, there's probably no point in reporting it, because if it doesn't violate platform policy, it's not going anywhere. But if you think it violates platform policy, if you think it's hateful, if you think it's harassing, report it. For everything else, it doesn't hurt to check in with the person that you're trying to support, because some people may really want a lot of public attention and support. Some people may not. Some people may just want to grumble about how frustrated they are in a one-on-one and not actually have any kind of interactions happening on social media on their behalf, because they just want the whole thing to die down. And finally, if you're going to engage, make sure that you do a few of those basic cybersecurity things, right, that we talked about before you get into the foray of someone else's. Yeah, bring them chocolate and wine. I think that's, or ice cream is what I will always say. Best thing you could possibly do for someone is just bring them nice snacks and listen to them if they're having a bad time online. Okay, and if anyone wants to share any things that they've done to support someone, or anything that someone has done to support them, we would really welcome that. And I am going to jump into the very final section, which is psychological well-being. Now we're going to have a whole session at the end of this series that is specifically focused on psychological well-being and mental health, that will be run by professional psychologists or folks who have training in mental health care. But just as a small segment today, we're going to talk about mental health as it relates to online abuse. I'm going to go through a few things, and then I'm going to pause and answer a question in the chat. So online harassment can be just as damaging to your physical and mental health as any other kind of physical harassment. People don't believe that. They think that somehow because it's in an online setting, you should just be able to ignore it or let it go. But there's been now a fair amount of research that has shown that we don't really distinguish between a death threat in a DM on Twitter versus a death threat that's left, as a voicemail, right? They're both terrifying. And so they both do damage. And so there's no shame in accepting and acknowledging that online harassment can actually cause you emotional and psychological harm. That's not because you're weak. It's not because you should be doing something differently than what you're doing. It is normal. And the best way to navigate it is to accept it, own it, and do the best that you can to address it in relation to yourself. So some ideas for self-care. I think some people have, especially journalists, at least historically, have had a little bit of an allergic reaction to the term self-care. I think that's changing, which I think is really positive. But when I'm talking about self-care, I'm talking about something that you've done for yourself to protect your mental health, to essentially refill your tank so that you can keep doing the things that you want to do. For some people, that might mean writing, keeping a journal. For other people, that might mean some kind of body work, right? You get a massage, you go to acupuncture. For someone else, that might mean, for me, it means hiking. Like for me, being outdoors, away from technology and machines, even if I have my cell phone in my pocket, I haven't quite mastered going on hikes without my cell phone, but I may someday be able to do that. Just like an old school map and a compass, I'm not there yet. But for me, going out into nature or seeing some art is really what refills my tank. But for other people, that might not work. Deep breathing, meditation, turning off your phone. I know for a lot of reporters that seems impossible, but if there are times when you can just take a break from your device, or at least turn off the notifications while you're trying to sleep, that kind of stuff is really useful to your mental health. Jeje, is there anything you wanted to jump in and share in terms of what works for you? I mean, I've shared that I do a little bit of meditation and deep breathing, but really what works for me is being outside and
For
taking
me,
breaks from my device.
meditation and walking, and I have like music for me is something very important. And I have like these 60 to 90 seconds dance party. I look stupid and I just dance around with music, and it's really helpful for me. I think what doesn't work with me that works for a lot of people, and it's so funny for some people, is that deep breathing stresses me out. So
Sorry to laugh.
I know that Victoria enjoys that very much now.
I love deep breathing. And she's like, no, Victoria, it's not helpful.
No, not for me, thank you. So you can actually find what works for you. It's very different from one to another. What I would really, really recommend, as Victoria said, turning off your phone or notification, just for a tiny bit, just to take a break. If you can ask someone to take care of that just for a little bit so that you're not thinking about it and you don't have to read all of these horrible things, that would be really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Jeje. I want to recommend the self-care section of our field manual, which I'll ask Amanda, please, to drop a link to in the chat. There's several sections on there, including a section called Advice from a Psychologist, which is actually guidance written by a psychologist who herself experienced severe online abuse. And so I want to just encourage you to take a look at that section in particular, but in general, to poke around a little bit on the self-care section of the field manual. I think you'll find some really valuable material there. And then Jeje, can you talk a little bit about when it might be a good idea to seek professional help?
Yes, and then we have a couple of actually very wonderful questions we
Yeah,
can
we'll
tag
come back.
team.
Let's do them at the end, but because I think
Yes.
it's a little bit
Mhm.
some subjects are connected to self-care and well-being and some are not. So we're going to take a whole bunch of questions all together at
Yes,
the
at
end.
the
We
end.
see your questions in the chat and we will address them very soon.
So with all of the things we discussed earlier, which really it depends on person to another, whatever works for you, there are still some things that you might want to consider getting professional help with. I am a very big supporter of therapy for everyone.
So am
I
I.
understand also that it's expensive and it's not necessarily accessible. And there are so many cultural things around therapy as well. So this is also something that I always keep in mind. But there are some signs that we pay attention to and some things that happen that we pay attention to. And if they persist, this is where we really recommend people to consider getting professional help. If you're constantly paralyzed by fear and cannot complete normal day-to-day tasks, the things that I normally do, that, for example, this specific thing that takes me normally 10 minutes or 5 minutes to do, now is taking me an hour, and tomorrow is taking me 2 hours to do this one thing. And I'm feeling that I really cannot get things done. I feel paralyzed. This is a sign that I am very overwhelmed and that I might actually need to get professional help. If I talk about the cyber abuse almost constantly, even to people that we do not know, it's preoccupying my mind. It's the thing that is always in my mind. This is another sign. If you're having difficulty sleeping or eating, these are very important things for us to be functional, to be healthy, to function properly, and your body and your well-being and your psychological well-being are good and you're nourishing them, your basic needs. If you cannot do that, that's also another sign. If you cannot enjoy your daily life because you continue to relive the trauma of your online abuse and you keep thinking about all of these things that you're receiving, that's another thing to keep in mind as well. And if your feelings of hopelessness and depression remain, even after the cyber abuse has ended, I want to also highlight that, like, feeling all of these things is very natural in the middle of an attack or right after an attack. What we're talking about is that if any of these signs persist for several weeks in a row and they're not going away or they're not changing, then this is when we actually might need to go seek professional help.
Thank you, Jeje. I want to point you to a few really excellent resources in addition to the ones we've been sharing. And again, we will send you, there will be a follow-up email where we'll include a lot of, well, as many as we can of the links that were in the chat and these as well. The Coalition Against Online Violence is a platform that is full of extraordinarily useful resources for all things related to online abuse. Legal support, funds, guidance, and tips. It's really helpful. The digital security helpline from Access Now is a 24/7 hotline where if you're having some kind of digital security crisis, if you're afraid you've been hacked, you can reach out to the hotline. It's available in, I think, 9 or 10 languages now. It's really good. And there's a lovely organization called Trollbusters, which the woman who founded it calls pest control for journalists. and a platform which I think actually just changed names. We're gonna have to update the slide. It used to be called HeartMob. It just changed names, but it's a platform you can be an ally to people and they can be an ally to you. Thank you, Amanda. Amanda caught that and sent the right link. I want to pause for a minute and address some of the comments and questions we've been getting in the chat, which not
Yes.
everyone can see, but which Jeje and I can see. So I'm going to talk through some of those. With mental health and journalism, when do people realize that enough is enough and they need to transition to a different job? What should people look for? That is such a smart and sensitive, but also very difficult question. I think I don't work in journalism. I'm not a journalist, but I work in a human rights space. And I will tell you that there are times when the work feels like too much. And then there are other times where it feels like I couldn't possibly do anything else. And so my hope, my idealistic hope, is that the journalism industry is finally starting to take psychological well-being and mental health more seriously than it used to, at least in the United States, although it's a very long uphill battle. And my hope is that with the proper support in place, people won't have to leave the journalism field because of the intensity of the toll that online abuse is taking, or that other secondary trauma and other attacks that they're experiencing might be taking. But in truth, only you can know if you have gotten to a point where the drawbacks or downsides of a job outweigh the things that you're getting out of it. And sometimes it's actually possible to change gears for a few years and do something else and then come back. And so I don't, I can't tell you, this is a reason why you should leave a job that you love, or this is a reason why you should not. I think it's a very personal decision, but I will say there is no shame in deciding that at a particular point in your life, something's not working for you and you need to change, and then potentially to go back to it later in your life. So that's my thoughts. I know, Jeje, you may have some thoughts on this too, as someone who
Yes.
was a journalist for many years.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to jump in and share.
I would say that I love this work. Generally, I was a journalist for many years. Then I shifted into the human rights, safety, and security field. It's not any easier. It's the same type of vicarious trauma that comes with it and all of that. What I would say is that maybe you want to check more on what is burnout, what is moral injury, how to navigate an industry that is very filled with that, actually. So how can you navigate this industry? How can you navigate working and making sure that you can protect yourself, or if a burnout is there, how can you navigate your way and heal and recover, and then you decide for yourself if that's still working for you or not. There is not a magic way of deciding. Honestly, I have been thinking about that always, because the job is very hard. This field is very, very hard and exhausting. But I keep thinking about it. What is the point? As Victoria mentioned, I reached a point that I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back just for a little bit to take care of myself. And then I decide when I'm feeling better that I'm going back to doing that. And that can look differently. It can be about an industry, but can also be about like a beat. Like you can change a beat, you can change what you're focusing on. So it changes from person to another.
I want to flag a few other things in the chat. So someone said that they actually, like Jeje, totally panic when they have to do an exercise involving deep breathing. They find it incredibly stressful. I just want to underscore that the whole point of self-care techniques is if something doesn't work for you, don't force yourself to do it, right? Like it's supposed to work for you, right? So I'm glad that people are being open about the fact that deep breathing doesn't work for them. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. Maybe something completely different works for you that I would never even occur to me. And that's absolutely fine. The whole point is that it is meant to help center you and help ground you so that you can cope. I want to answer a few other questions. So what is the best way to go about dealing with aggressive emails and messages from readers? A few thoughts. There's always the respond with puppy photos, although it may be better not to respond at all. But if you're going to respond, a straight up puppy photo might be a good idea. But in all earnestness, save abusive emails, put them in a folder somewhere, but save them. If they rise to the level of making you concerned for your safety, please let your employer know, and consider also filing a police report. You can put filters on your email inbox for certain kinds of words, not unlike being able to put filters on like in Twitter or Facebook, which can just shut certain emails to a folder and you can either go to them later. I don't know. I want to do a quick Google before I say this for sure, but there used to be this really cool tool called Squad Box, which would allow you to essentially have a friend help you triage nasty emails. I don't know if it's operational right now, but in a pinch, you could actually give very limited delegated access to your inbox to someone that you trust, and you can swap. Basically, you can have, it doesn't mean that they can see everything in your inbox. You can control what kind of delegated access you give someone, but those are just a few thoughts off the top of my head of how to cope with specifically emails as opposed to like a social media post or a DM. And then the next question is, how do I manage privacy during off hours work? For example, if I RSVP'd in events on a, or if I use a dating on Meetup, or if I use a dating app, how do I keep things private and not have a stalker? So I'm going to give you a short answer and a shorter answer. The shortest answer is, please come to our next session. We will literally, you will take out your phones and go through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Insta, and we'll talk about limiting your private information. Those are not dating apps, but many of the same rules apply. And so we can tell you kind of where to poke around in some of the dating apps. Really just spend time with settings on apps. Most apps will default you into everything in your life being public, and you have to opt in to making it private. It's infuriating, it's wrong, but that's how it works. Venmo, for example, will make all of your interactions public unless you go into your settings at Venmo and turn all that off. So that is one thing. The other thing is Jeje talked about separating your email accounts, separating your phone numbers. I will tell you what I do. I have 3 emails. It's exactly like Jeje said. I have a work email, I have my private email for my friends and family, and then I have a spammy email where I sign up for stuff, including dating apps. I also have a virtual phone number that I use. It's through Google Voice. It's super easy to set up, that I exclusively use on dating apps. My actual real phone number belongs to a very small handful of people in my life whom I know and trust, and I don't use my real personal phone number with the vast majority of the people that I interact with until I get to know them. So those are just a few tips, but if you want a whole sea of tips and want to actually do some of this stuff in real time, please come to our next session, where we'll talk to you about hacking, doxing, social media accounts, email accounts, etc., in more detail in real time.
I would add
Jeje,
also
did I miss
something to
anything?
that.
Yeah.
Not at all, but I would just like add some stuff. When it comes to Meetup and like RSVPing for events and stuff, one of the things that I tend to do, if you're still using Facebook, I don't RSVP on Facebook events. I add it to my calendar directly, what I want to do, like on my private calendar that no one has access to. And I add these events there so that I don't want anyone else to know what I'm doing or what I'm going to be. This is one thing. The other thing is, if you have to RSVP as account, I diversify my name. I actually create different, I create different names.
Do
I
you
create
really?
different names. Yes.
You have
Because I don't want,
aliases.
yeah, exactly. It's actually, you can make it fun. But it's, for me, it's like, I just don't want, if it has to be public and people have to see that I RSVP'd and as part of like holding a space and for you in that event, I don't want people to know that like I go to these events or like any events that look like this, so that no one can know like my route, my life, what I do, the way I like all of that. I don't want people to have access to that. So you can do that as well. You can use initials. Again, as Victoria said, your virtual number or additional number, all of that. If you can add things to your calendar directly, not RSVP if not needed, that also helps keeping it only to you.
Yeah, and the other thing is I actually avoid, on multiple sites, like on Eventbrite or other places, if you RSVP to something and then it will say like add to your calendar, I avoid those kinds of automated shortcuts because sometimes it actually means that they have to be able to get access to your calendar in order to be able to add something, which makes me very uncomfortable. So basically a little bit extra manual work means that you have a little bit more privacy. So we're going to wrap up because we're at time. I think we managed to cover everyone's questions. If we missed anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Oh, I should give you the last slide so you can see how. Last quote from Lindy West, whom I love: the fact that we've learned to cope doesn't mean we shouldn't demand better. God bless her. And here is our information. You can follow us on Twitter, but if you want to reach out, just email us. We can talk you through something that we ran out of time for today. And again, please, please, please come to our next session where we'll talk to you about hacking, doxing, and protecting your private information. And we're very, very delighted to see how many people stuck through the entire hour and a half. Thank you so much for spending that kind of time with us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful
Take care of
day, and we hope
yourselves.
to see you next session.